Tatum was a Vietnam Special Forces Air Combat Controller, Defense Intelligence Asset, and U.S. Army Special Operations Pilot, flying classified missions during the U.S. invasion of Grenada. Tatum was also involved in the Nixon Administration's relations with China, NASA's Apollo program, the Iran Contra Affair, and several other classified intelligence operations dating through 1992. A 25-year CIA deep cover agent and a member of the ultra-secret Pegasus hit team, working directly for the sitting president. His website is www.chiptatum.com, and it's a great pleasure to have him on tonight. Hello there, Chip.
Hi, Solaris. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Hi. Doing well, thank you.
It's great to have you on tonight. I want to thank you so much for joining us in these strange and critical times. So really appreciate you being here with us. And do you want me to address you as Chip or Gene? Which one do you want me to use?
I'm good with either, but not with both.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll call you Chip. I like that.
Okay.
All right. So give us a rundown. I know you had something going on with you. You just you had some kind of a parasite of some kind. You want to give us a rundown as far as what's been going on with you?
Sure. As many of you may know or may not know, I am in South America now, and as I was leaving the country, I was held in Miami at the international airport while they cleared me off the no-fly list. But they detained me in a room, basically, all glass, so they could see me, and they said it's the same rooms that they use with people coming in that are considered health hazards or need to be sequestered for any other reason. And when I got down into Colombia, where I live a portion of the year, and have set up my new studios, about 2 weeks later, I started running a temperature of 105 degrees. And so I figured I better go see the doctor. I went to see the doctor down here, and within 2 hours, they diagnosed me with having a very rare Asian blood parasite. They treated it, and I'm back up to about 80%. And at my age, I think 80% is all I'm going to go to. I don't think I'll get back to my old 100%, but I'm good with that. They told me that if I was in the United States, they probably would have never diagnosed it, and I would have died. So thank goodness I'm down here where they're used to diagnosing tropical diseases.
Mm-hmm. Right. We're really glad you're with us. Yeah, that was pretty critical. I saw some photographs of that, and I wanted to address it. So you don't think it was sabotaged? Do you? I mean, did it just seem like something that was just seemed to happen, or do you think there's suspicious associations?
The doctors said it had, because of the timing and because of the time it takes to start producing the fevers and everything. It was 2 weeks, and that was 2 weeks within 1 or 2 days or 2 weeks of the time I was in the holding cell in Miami.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Very, very suspicious, and he even thought it was pretty suspicious. He said, "Who are you?"
Do you really want to answer that? Right? Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad you're with us, and like I said, I think that you tell a lot of important information. You have a lot of details to share with us tonight. I've heard your interviews on so many other shows, and I'm so impressed with your information. Not to mention, we're dealing with so much deception right now. We're at a crossroads here in America regarding our freedom. I'm sure you're aware, and I wanted to touch base with you tonight on this, especially insofar as what this agenda is about. Also the types of quote unquote refugees, which are just completely coming over in droves across the border. Sounds to me like it's not necessarily what it appears to be. So can we go into this area, and can you give us a rundown insofar as what your assessment is of that situation?
Well, I was gone from the country, folks, for 9 years. And when I came back, I had seen such an escalation in the plans of what then was called the New World Order, how it's come almost to fruition. And now, for it to happen, in one of our meetings years ago, we talked about having to go into a state of emergency versus a martial law, and what the parameters for each would be and what would be most advantageous. And I told I told President Bush at the time, I said in our meeting, I said, sir, there's no way that the American armed forces will ever work against the citizens of the United States. He said, Tatum, you just do your job, we'll do ours. And as I see now, the armed forces have been used as police around the world. A lot of the armed forces leaders have been true leaders have been purged, and political leaders are in now, lapdogs for the regime in Washington right now, and I'm calling it a regime, not an administration. Administration administers, and that's not being done. That's very obvious.
Correct.
And what I see is now we look at our National Guard. Who are our National Guard? There are policemen. Most policemen are now a huge amount of National Guard members are policemen, and the policemen have been militarized. So, you see a lot of that. My son was a Special Forces instructor, and after 16 years, last year he said, "Dad, I can't stay," and he left. I said, "Son, why are you leaving?" I said, "Only 4 more years and you have your retirement." He said, I can't do what they want us to do. And we left it at that. I understood completely what he was saying, and so I applauded him for leaving and taking that stand. I
agree.
I see a lot of the border crossings. I mean, a lot of what we call indicators in the intelligence business. You see 5,000 gangbangers and drug dealers being released into the streets. And as a matter of fact, out of that 4,000, just this week, Obama pardoned and commuted sentences of some people spending life in prison. I think there were up to 95 people, and several of those were spending life in prison for drugs and guns. So what he's doing is he's putting armies in the street, folks. That's exactly what he's doing.
Yep.
He's taking these people from prison who were sent to prison, and when they got to prison, they were at the largest criminal university in the world, because who do you have there? All these criminal masterminds in federal prison, and they don't have anything to do during the day except go out and exercise and talk about how they got caught and how they can avoid getting caught in the future. And their intention is to come back out and not get caught. And they think they can do it better now because they've worked out the issues on how they got caught.
Right. Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it's interesting because I guess they're expecting the American people to cave. And right now I see a majority of American people really just oblivious or maybe in denial. There are many of us here who are prepared and obviously on guard. But insofar as a solution to this equation, it seems like the hive is in D.C. We have a rogue DC, whatever you want to call it. I call it a kebab. You can call it whatever, or excuse me, a cabal. You can call it a regime. But literally, these are the guys that are pulling the strings here. But who are their handlers? I mean, who's the people that are really operating this agenda?
What we have here is we have the political class, the political elite. I mean, these are career politicians. They make their living off of the taxpayers' money. And they're not going to give that up, and they're pushing. And then there's those who have already left office, who are controlled elsewhere. But they hold the controls because they hold to them, power is money, and as long as they control the money and the Federal Reserve, and they have that printing press there, they can do whatever they want. And it's come to be true. In our meetings in Jupiter Island, it was stated that as long as we keep the people happy, they're not going to come out into the streets. So we need to keep food on the table for them. We need to try to keep a roof over their head and gas in the car. And that's exactly what they've been trying to do. Although I will say 3 out of 10 homes in the state of Florida where I have my part-time residence went into foreclosure. Mm-hmm. And people were having to buy trailers and RVs and live in those while they tried to recover themselves financially. Rent went so high that it was like 3 times the cost of what their mortgage was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing the upper middle class to middle class going into poverty. There's no doubt about that. So whatever they're saying. And another thing is, I look at this Homeland Security, and to me, obviously, that's an infiltration of the Muslim Brotherhood. And it seems to me like there are so many people strategically positioned that are connected with the Muslim Brotherhood that are completely infiltrated this entire country.
Yeah, how about that? Who did we support? The Muslim Brotherhood.
Unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're all over the map now. So now we have all these invaders, basically strategically positioning. Now, I've heard you before touch on an American Spring. I was wondering if you can elaborate on that.
Indicators, and indicators show me that things are escalating so quickly, and putting these 5,000 this month up to 40,000 by March, gangbangers and drug dealers on the streets, keeping the borders open. And I say keeping the borders open because they're really not stopping these people. Trying to bring in the Syrian refugees. Look, there's no way they can vet these refugees coming in. They don't know who they are. There's just no way they can do it. It took them 2 years to vet Delia, my wife, to come in from Colombia. And they're bringing these people in post haste on a plane, flying them in. They have no clothes, they have nothing. They get them $35,000, put them on buses, send them out shopping, and within a few weeks release them. Even the Cuban refugees, those people who would come, remember the boat people days, those people would come over. They were held in Chrome and Louisiana and immigration centers and vetted before they were vetted and actually schooled before they were put out onto the streets. That doesn't seem to be happening with the Syrian refugees, and there has to be some type of agenda there. When I was in Costa Rica, let me talk about this. When I was in Costa Rica, the owners of one of the largest pizzerias, Dos per Uno, if any of you are in Costa Rica listening, Ali was his name, and he had a private mosque. His wife came to us one day and said I need help. Ali wants to take my son from me, and he's Muslim. And Islamic religion says they have to protect their firstborn son. And he's a dangerous man. He beats me. He slaps his son around. But I want to leave. So the Minister of Intelligence for Costa Rica, a good friend of mine, I contacted him. We arranged an operation to sneak her out of her home, put up roadblocks so that when his guards tried to follow us, they couldn't. We got her safely out, and in a debriefing, she explained to us that he had 13 passports from different countries and in different names. And the day after 9/11, he suddenly jumped a plane to Pakistan and was gone for 2 weeks and came back. We reported that to the embassy officials, and they did nothing about it. She explained that his company, he's able, because his company is not only the 2-for-1 pizza. He had a large gaming enterprise in Costa Rica back in the sportsbook days. They ran the call rooms, and they brought in millions and millions of dollars and laundered millions of dollars through this. They would bring workers in from the Middle East that would handle the call rooms, get them visas to go to Canada from Costa Rica, which is pretty easy. Once they're in Costa Rica for a few months, getting a Canadian visa is simple. They would get them to Canada in his company in Canada, and then they would disappear. And it was very easily done. And it is still very easily done. That's a very porous border from Canada to the U.S. And even more porous on the southern border. But
oh yeah. Well, so what do you think the status is with Canada? Do you think they're going to get the bleed-through effect of what's happening here? I mean, with all this intrusion and invasion, obviously there's a restructuring going on that's not in the highest good for those of us who are real Americans. Do you think the Canadians are in the same boat?
I think that because they're a melting pot and they're being used for that, I don't think that they have to be that concerned about attacks there. You see that there have been relatively few attacks up there, if any. I've seen none reported. So these guys are pretty smart. They're they're not going to crap in their own backyard, basically
right.
speaking. You know, they're gonna keep things status quo there, and come toward their target. Who's arranging that? You know, I have to say a lot of culpability sits with the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Immigration, because they're doing nothing but supporting the mass immigration of unvetted Islamic criminals into this country.
Yep.
That's as basically as I can say. Look, not every Muslim is a terrorist, but every terrorist is a Muslim.
Right. Well, there's definitely an agenda involved, and it's not in the highest good. You know, it's interesting because, you know, as I said before, Department of Homeland Security is infiltrated with the Muslim Brotherhood. There have all of these, well, firearms, you name it, the big bullets, you know, whatever it is, they get it. And then we have these people that are not in alignment with the American people. Obviously, they're not looking out for us. So do we have a military that can actually support us? I mean, when push comes to shove in that situation, do we have American military backing us up in a crisis like that, or is it just a dead end to nowhere?
You have American military following the orders of their commander in chief. I mean,
wow.
That's the chain of command. That's how we're taught. And now, since they've been acclimated to being anti-terrorists, and all you have to do is say these people are terrorists. These people in the streets are terrorists. The National Guard will get out there. They're pretty trigger happy. Look, we can go all the way back to Kent State to see if the National Guard will fire on American people or not, can't we? Remember that?
Right.
The answer is hell yes, they will.
Yeah, that's really almost seems, I don't want to say hopeless at this point in the continuum. I think the one saving grace is, yes, we have firearms as American people, and that we need to hold on to our firearms, obviously. But when push comes to shove, and this intrusion and this invasion, the more I look and see, the more they're trying to shove Sharia law down everybody's throat here in the United States. I mean, it's getting nasty, it's getting ugly, and it's going to get more aggressive and more abusive. Obviously, a concern of the women and the children. Obviously, everybody who's not in alignment with their belief systems and their agenda. So do you have any feedback on that?
I have friends who are in the military who say they'll simply leave. You know, they can't stay in. They'll just desert with their weapons and go on the lam. A lot of them see it. I mean, a lot of them see that could be in the very near future. I say this spring because of everything that's evolving right now. You don't put these armies in the street when you're not planning on using them right away. AK-47s have disappeared from what we call the project, and in a very private funding project by the project, Naval Intelligence. 349 silencers were made for AK-47s. What's that all about? Our SEALs don't use AK-47s, and it was a SEAL. They say it was for SEAL Team 6. Our SEALs don't use AK-47s, so they have much better weapons now. So yeah, and those silencers have gone into, because it's in a federal court right now, have gone in as evidence. But the Navy said the weapons that they were made for were destroyed. Right, they weren't destroyed. The project has warehouses. The project is one entity, and then we have the warehouses that are set up in 5 places around the world. There's one in Texas. There's one in Pennsylvania. The one in Texas I've been to. The one in Pennsylvania I have not been to, but I know about it. They call them in the CIA. They call them the Armory. We need you to go to the Armory, see what's there, see what you need, and that's basically what they told us for Iran Contra. See what's there, see what you need, and we'll get it shipped down to you. So, the Armory is there, and it's a huge warehouse, and it's ground to ceiling weapons, small arms, explosives, heavy arms, artillery, anything you want, everything you want can come out of that Armory in Leon Springs, Texas. So.
And who has access to that? Which division or which group?
Well, it's a federal facility, and on Leon Springs Military Reservation, it's actually a higher security reservation than any other regular military reservation, and the Armory itself is run by the CIA.
Okay. Well, can I ask, and obviously I probably know the answer to this question, whose side is the CIA on? This is orchestrated with them, obviously, to some degree, right?
Well, back in the old days, they were on their own side. Now they're not. I have friends who have left just last year and said we're getting out,
Mm-hmm.
gone. So they're not on our side.
Right. Well, it sounds, are they partially rogue and maybe just partially with this New World Order, which I call a No World Order? But yeah.
Yeah, as you grow through ranks and as you come along in government agencies, you start seeing the fraud, you start seeing the deception, and you either hang with it or you leave.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the older guys got to a point where they can finally leave. Some of them couldn't. Even with the military. Look, I knew General Petraeus, and everyone calls him General Betrayus. Um, some things, just like with me, sometimes you have to do what you're told to do until you can get the hell out. And he finally ended up getting the hell out because he couldn't deal with Obama any longer and what was going on there. As a military man, it's hard for a true leader to deal with the dictates coming down from the commander-in-chief's office. And he doesn't have Secretary of Defenses. He has lapdogs there who just
Right.
whatever he wants, they do. They don't argue. Aye, aye, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 3 bags full. And
It's unbelievable.
you can't have military commanders saying yes, sir. Yes, sir. 3 bags full. You have to have a military commander with balls to stand up for his men. And now the generals are nothing more than politicians.
It's a shame. It's really so sad. We used to have one of the most powerful countries, and it just seems to me like we're just right there in the gutter right now. Now, he's obviously, Obama has committed treason. I mean, what does it take to get somebody like him out of office? Can't we try him? Can't we just go in there and create martial law and surround this facility and say, look, that's it. It's done. It's over. He's putting American people in harm's way. This is obviously treason. It's obviously an invasion, and it's obviously a war.
In social democracies, you have your voting machine and you have your elections. And once you're elected, if you want to control that democracy and take it to a social side, you control the courts, you control the Department of Justice, and you control law enforcement. And that's what's happened. He has total controls on those. He's put his people in, and they're not about to do it. Just like with Hillary. I mean, what she's done. Using her personal email. It's absolutely against all dictates of the federal government to do that. And look, that's what they were going after 2 CIA directors for having information on personal computers. And they were going into indictments. And Bill Casey ended up, before he went in to testify, ended up with a voluntary brain operation that killed him. And then Bill Colby, of course, had problems rowing his canoe.
A voluntary brain operation, huh? Sounds interesting.
Yeah. The day before he was to go in to testify, the doctor said it's an emergency. You have to come in, and we know you can probably make it through that surgery, and we know you can make it into your testimony, but we think you should come and take care of this first, and then you can have your testimony later on. They said it even though it was brain surgery, it wasn't life-threatening.
Right.
Killed him. They killed him.
Absolutely. Well, I don't think we have to put special glasses on to know that this is very evil. This whole agenda is evil, and I think you've had a taste of what they're about with your own experience with just how deceptive and disgustingly evil these people can really be. And I guess the question is, at what point in the continuum do people stand up? Is there a possibility to have some kind of a revolution? I mean, obviously, if we have this influx of criminals that are coming through here, terrorists, whatever you want to call them, there's going to be a fight, there's going to be a battle, there's going to be a war. That's all there is to it. I can guarantee you there's a great majority of people who own firearms who are not going to put up with this crap. So what do you see, Joe?
Well, I agree. I see people getting in the streets. And if violence is perpetrated first, they'll return with violence. Look, folks, not everyone is a warrior. we have a lot of warriors in the United States, people who are trained to do that. We have 20 million veterans, and I'm sure that many of those veterans are willing to stand up for democracy, for the Constitution, and for each and every one of you again, because they've stood up for you in the past. So not everyone's a warrior, but everyone has to be involved. You have to make the noise in the streets to get the politicians to understand that we're done with their crap. You career politicians need to leave. You need to leave real fast, or we're going to leave you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm
So,
just like, I don't know about everybody else, but I've had enough of this crap. I mean, I thought about moving outside of the United States, and obviously, I mean, you've spoken about people moving outside, maybe going to South America or something. Is there a safe zone in the United States, first of all?
you get outside the major metro areas, you're not in the primary grid zones. So, yeah, there are areas where it's safer, but it's going to be just as difficult. Look, when you go into a state of emergency, then even logistically speaking, you aren't getting your uh, supermarket shelves get very sparse. Even water systems may go down, electric grids may go down. It depends on how this goes down. If it goes down like Putin's, I doubt that it'll go down like Putin's Ukraine. But when he took over the Crimea Peninsula, that was very quick, very easy, and very sly, I thought. But I do see, logistically speaking, we're going to have a lot of problems. And that's why I say people should arm themselves. Look, when things go south, when things go bad, you're not going to have all the food on the shelves, and you who are prepared are going to become targets. And you should have an arm. You should have a shotgun. You should have a weapon there, if nothing else, to protect you and your family from the looters. That's your first line of defense. That's what I see happening first, is looters trying to get in, and these gangbangers and looters in the streets trying to cause war. That's where the first disturbances are going to come from, and you should be armed to defend yourself there.
Right. It certainly sounds like it's just ramping up for a bloodbath. I've been monitoring a lot of different areas. Obviously, Europe's having a hard time with these quote unquote immigration, with this influx. And I have to ask, how many Syrians are there, Chip? I mean, how many? What kind of numbers are we talking here? Seems like they're getting dumped off in the droves everywhere. I mean, how many are there? Pray tell.
As many, quote, Syrians as the cabal wants to push into the United States. Are they from Syria? Who knows? Right. Probably not. They're probably from all over the Middle East. Most likely are from all over the Middle East, not really Syrian.
So. Right. And as you said, they cannot be vetted. So
sure.
How can you find their history? And then they roll out the red carpet for these guys, as you were speaking about. These guys are coming in and just getting special treatment, as far as I can tell. So that's another thing that I'm looking at. When you speak of the state of emergency, I've heard you communicate about this before, versus martial law, because martial law would indicate that we could possibly get rid of Obama, but the state of emergency implies that he would be able to stay.
Sure. We talked about that years ago. State of emergency versus martial law. In a state of emergency, the power stays in the executive office. The president stays in power. And the requirement is that he is to report to Congress from time to time. Look, every month, every 6 months, he can send a postcard to Congress and say, "Hey guys, all is well. Go get your paychecks. No vote this month." So that's the state of emergency. On the military side, if we go into martial law, the president releases the executive office power to the generals. Now, even there, you have to remember who the generals are. But he still maintains more power in a state of emergency. And even in France just recently, you can see they used state of emergency instead of martial law to handle the problems over there.
Right. Do you see an election coming up, or do you see it somehow going in a different direction with him, Obama, staying in office?
State of emergency, he can certainly suspend elections.
Right.
That's been done before. He joked in one press conference. Maybe he'll stay around. I don't think that's so much joking, folks. maybe he will stay around.
Well, I'll tell you, he has a year left, and at this point in the continuum, I think we're really screwed if something doesn't change drastically on behalf of the American people. And as I've said, I don't think they're uncomfortable enough to really do anything. A lot of us are very, very concerned. I have Misha Johnson here calling in. I think I mentioned before. Let's see here. Are you there, Misha? Oops. Hello? Hang on, everybody. Are you there, Chip?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Let me get Misha for a second. Misha's also she's going to be kind of like a co-host, and she had a lot of interest in your work, and I know she wanted to join us, so I'll let her in here. I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, I'll drag her in a second here. But yeah, I mean, so what's your take on that? You think he'll probably create something to keep his ass over there in that D.C. area? Seems to me like they're all squatting in the White House. I mean, honestly, it's like the Clintons. You can't get rid of them. It's like permanent fixtures.
And that's what I was talking about and alluding to earlier, the political class. On either on chiptatum.com or on my All News network, allnews.network, there's an article about the political class and how this was a 1991 article now, talking about how they're going to embed themselves. So it's interesting. I think if you go to chiptatum.com, you can read that 1991 study that was done and published. I republished it there for everyone to read. Very, very interesting how they embed themselves and how it was predicted that people would become so sick of them that they just want them out.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
we have, and that's it, folks. You have to move them out. You know, I know what everyone's saying, but I would vote. If I were allowed to vote, but because I was charged with treason and have a felony, I can't vote. So if I were allowed to vote, I would certainly not vote for anyone who has had a term in office, because they haven't done damn thing for us to begin with.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how you've been treated, because honestly, it's like you have these people who are committing treason every single day. They're up there in D.C., committing atrocities that are beyond the word of description, and yet they sit there and they just loiter like an infestation and a cancer. Nobody does a damn thing, and then they screw you over. It's just amazing to me to watch this stuff play out, and I get so fierce and so fired up about it, Chip. I'll tell you what, I'm so ticked off right now, because I expected, we had such a wonderful military. I've been proud of our military. I wanted everything to, pan out in alignment with a higher vision for America, and it just seems like it's completely gutted. So once again, I do appreciate you coming on the show. I did want to say Misha Johnson is here with me. She's going to be kind of like a co-host, and she has an interesting background, but I know she was interested in having you on her show. But hey, Misha, you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Hi, Chip. I've really been following a little bit of your information and looking forward to
Hi,
hearing
Misha.
more.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm a monarch from the old days, the first generation. So I'll just keep listening.
Yeah, and if you have a question, Visa, chime in.
Okay,
also, yeah, she's been through some hardcore mind control and some really bad stuff. So I'm sure you guys could share and take notes probably. But yeah, very interesting stuff. But I know it all dovetails in. Once again, it's about control, manipulation, any form of design. And we're seeing it play out here. I was going to ask you about Russia's stance insofar as what's happening here on the global, the game board. What does Russia really represent at this point in the continuum? Are they shaking hands under the table? Are they supporting this thing?
Russia wants to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Russia, Putin is not one to sit still. He wants to grow his country. He wants to strengthen his country. The more we throw sanctions against him, the more he just laughs in the United States' face, because the sanctions hurt a little bit. But look, he's in Syria. He's strategically positioned there, and by going into Syria, people don't realize that what he's gained a major good friend in China, because China is the joint venture partner with Assad in the Syrian national oil. So China has a lot to lose in a regime change. The last thing they want to see is an Assad regime change. And because Russia is in the area of operations and jumped in, it's easier for them to help out the Chinese, and thus making them because they were former communist countries, USSR and China always has been, well, not always, but for years, doesn't mean that they were friends, doesn't mean that they got along, and they didn't. But now they seem to get along well. China has given Russia drone pilots, and they're actively flying the area. China has even made the statement, I have a friend who's an intelligence officer in Russia, and she's a lieutenant. She tells me that they've made the statement that they will put a human wall on the Turkish border if needs be to stop the logistics of chemical weapons via sarin, the chemicals for sarin coming through Turkey into Syria, and weapons, and to keep the ISIS fuel from going into Turkey. Now, folks, if you remember, in Syria, the Assad regime was charged with using sarin gas on the citizens, and that's one of the big human atrocities that's been touted against Assad by the international courts. Well, just recently it was brought out by one of the ministers in Syria that the chemicals used to build sarin gas were actually sent to ISIS, to the ISIS groups, to the terrorists, not to the Syrian government. The Syrian government didn't have sarin gas. Mm-hmm. And so these chemicals were sent there, and the chemicals were supplied by the West. They were supplied by the European countries and the West. It was they were found coming across the border, one group of them, and they were seized within days. They were let loose to go back to go across the border, and everything was dropped and silenced. And this minister came out and spoke out against it, and he has been placed under investigation for treason. Funny how that works, isn't it?
I'm telling you. Yeah, unbelievable. What about a potential nuclear war?
You know, there's some crazies in the world, but nobody wants their land sterilized. Mm-hmm. And that you know, as long as they see a future for them to be there, the governments and the militaries, they won't sterilize their land. But if they get pushed in a corner and see no other alternative, I see them flying.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to say, you know, when you're eradicating a certain species or whatever, a certain race or a certain class of people, which appears to be happening here with Europe, obviously it seems like American people are targets. That's an eradication of some kind, and it warrants some kind of a counterattack. And I'm just curious as far as what will transpire, what you see a possibility as a possibility to transpire. I mean, something's got to give here. We can't do this. And if we get into this kind of a conflict, I think it's going to get ugly before people, you know, completely flatline. I think something's going to spike up. I was just curious. Maybe we also have the possibility of the black space technologies, a lot of cloaked, hidden technologies that we're not really fully deploying that could take out, well, you mentioned the grid, the EMP blast, that could take the grids down. But if that takes the grids down, now doesn't that take out our military and their defense grids and everything else that launches satellites and whatever else they need to launch with missiles?
It can if they have not protected those circuit boards.
Right. Okay.
The older generation stuff that they're replacing with all the black space program flights going out of Kennedy, going out of, I mean, we have flights going out all over the place, rockets going out that you don't realize all over the country. There's several launch sites, and we're launching, especially with these nano satellites now. They fit in your hand, and they're disposable. I mean, they'll stay up and stay powered for so long, and then they'll power down and fall back to Earth. So with the space technology we have, the newer stuff, it's all going up protected. The older stuff is being phased out, and even our military equipment. I know our Blackhawks in the 80s were subject to failure of the stabilator. That's that wing on the back of the helicopter, folks. When a certain VHF frequency was hit, the stabilator would go to a down position, nosing the Black Hawk into the ground, and we had several incidents of crashes of those, killing everyone on board. And we couldn't figure out what it was until one of the engineers figured out that it was our own troops using certain frequencies, transmitting communications back and forth, and the helicopters flying at low level, called nap of the earth, just above the trees at 120, 130 miles an hour. And that wing flaps down, the nose goes in, and the pilot doesn't have time to recover. And it was all over it. The stabilator failure was due to a frequency, so they had to put a resistor in against that frequency.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it sounds like a directed energy weapon of some kind, in any way you look at it. But it's interesting, because of the covert technology and the black satellites and all the other things that they have. What's your impression of the breakaway society? It seems to me like this is a free for all here on the timeline, and that there are certain groups and classes of people that have already decided they're going to be off planet to some degree. Do you have any insight on that?
None whatsoever. I really don't. But there's a reason. I worked with NASA, and I worked the communications side out of Guam with NASA, and we there's a reason we have the space station and people staying up there for a year at a time, and it's not just to see how man handles himself for a year. They have covert missions going on up there, and resupply missions and so forth. So, speaking absolute of what I know, I don't. Okay. I suspect a lot of things, but I don't like to talk about what I suspect.
Right.
I like to talk about what I have direct knowledge of and indicators.
Mm-hmm. That's fair enough. I just had to ask you, though, curiosity, because it seems to me like it's such a reckless maneuver on the chessboard, what's going on right now. I realize that sometimes lives don't matter with these people. They don't seem to care about people, their family, their children, their grandchildren. It just doesn't seem to matter to them. Everything's collateral damage. So I was curious insofar as what your insight was, but I appreciate that response. When you mention the military, when I talk about the military, who is the strongest military right now across the board insofar as countries go? I used to think we were the superpower, but I'm beginning to wonder.
Well, if you look at numbers, you have China, who's a huge threat, and because of the lack of sophisticated arms, they were never a threat. But now they've built up their arms. They have advanced arms, advanced technology, thanks to the Clintons. So I'd say China, although they're not that adept and not practiced in wartime, is one of the better equipped and larger threats worldwide. If they were to enter a war, Russia has been silently upgrading all their equipment, all their electronics, all their aircraft. United States is still pretty damn powerful.
Well,
we're still pretty damn powerful, but we're coming down, and with the new ideas of in Washington degrading the American military, that I'd say we'd fall to as at least second place in power if that happens.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really shameful. Like I said before, it's really sad to watch this country going down, and it seems to me like it really is at the hands of such illiterate subhuman, what I call subhumans. Honestly, I don't consider them to be anything but a bunch of trash in matrices. It's really unfortunate. I don't know what else to say. I get so annoyed, Chip, and I so appreciate you once again being on here. Misha, if you have any questions, chime in. Are you still there?
I sure am.
Okay.
No, not yet.
Okay, so I know you're listening, but if you want to mention a question, feel free to do so. So another question would be, obviously we probably have the answer to this, but who's really funding ISIS? Who's funding these extremists, these Islamic terrorists and extremists that are coming over here? It sounds to me like it's coming right out of D.C.
Well, we trained them.
Right,
we trained them. We trained them. We armed them, and they don't need our money. They're pretty well self-funded. Look at all the oil they have. Look at what they're selling.
Right.
The drugs and the oil. They're in pretty good shape. $1 billion a month goes a long ways.
Oh my God.
So
lucrative is all hell. There's no doubt about it.
Sure. And even when the international community just said that they have decided. Now this is how long a year later they've decided to no longer allow banks to allow ISIS with accounts or whatever. Well, countries are still going to allow ISIS with banks. The international community doesn't control that. I mean, that's money for the banks, and just not going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
So they were initially funded by us. Now they're pretty well self-funding and growing, and whenever this entity, if you want to call them ISIS, call them ISIS. Whenever this entity sees a soft spot on the globe, they seem to migrate toward that soft spot. I call it a soft spot because it's a political regime change, attempted political regime change, or in-country issues. When they see those, they find that soft spot, and they migrate toward that soft spot and find their in, and are able to migrate there and become a force to be reckoned with around the globe. It's just not in the Middle East. They've moved into portions of the South Pacific, Asia, wherever there seems to be some type of funding mechanism for them, whether it be natural resources or whatever.
Yeah, they're kind of like what they mentioned in the movie The Matrix. They're like a virus. They just go from place to place and take everything. It's interesting. Obviously, you were just talking about who trained these groups, but who specifically trained these groups? I mean, what organization is really responsible for training them in hand-to-hand combat? How good are they? Let's put it that way.
Well, we put our own advisors in and trained them. Our military advisors, special forces. We, not only us, Israel put their people in. I mean, it was joint effort back in the old days to get these people trained and get them moving against the bad guys, so to speak. So it was us, it was Israel's, it was the British, and all special forces from these groups. And when I say special forces and Defense Intelligence Agency usually is involved in that. And when I say DIA, along with that you have the CIA. So
right. Yeah. So originally, were they trained to eradicate the enemy, something worse than them, and then they just become the monster on the block, or what?
Well, really, back in the 80s, they during Reagan, we were training them. We set up all the camps and everything, and we set those up to help for them to work as paramilitaries working for us around the world. So we're training them to help in regime changes and everything else. Clinton came into office, and so we set up these large camps, trained these people, gave them food, gave them money, brought their families in these training camps with them, put our special forces, CIA, everyone else in, showing them how to perform special ops intrusions, interrogations, showing them all the secrets on locksmithing. I mean, everything, the whole realm. And we kept them in the desert and happy, and using them from time to time in incursions into other countries. Then when Clinton came in, he thought that was pretty immoral that we would do that. So he cut funding to them. He cut everything off, and so they were on their own. And they grew into what they have grown into today. However, most recently, we've gone into with Iraq and so forth. We've been able to go in and start retraining of these guys. We don't vet who we're training. We give them their arms, we give them their weapons, we give them their training, and all of a sudden they disappear. As a matter of fact, last week we have two pilots from Afghanistan training at Moody Air Force Base that have disappeared here in the United States.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, well, that's more than interesting.
Right, yeah,
that's a problem.
Yeah, but once again, this is something they want to have happen in D.C. I mean, this is the move they're making on the chessboard. Am I wrong? But that's what they're after, right? Sabotage?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. 3 bags full.
I'm just so done. I don't know what to say, Chip. I'm like, do I move to South America or Canada or just get off the map, or do I stand and fight? It's just one of those things you have to really assess it on so many different levels. But I guess the biggest thing I'm concerned about is what's going to transpire come spring, and what's going to happen when we get this huge amount of people, which I wouldn't call people, these animals that come in here who are literally strategically designed to take down America and harm and obviously do horrific things to the American people. So that is a big concern with me. And I know it's a lot of concern with everybody else. I mean, anybody who's listening, obviously it's just a concern.
It should be a concern. I have a huge concern. My children, adults now, my children and grandchildren are there, and I've tried to convince them to come, but they're embedded. It's difficult, and they even have an in here, but they're embedded in what they're doing there, and it's difficult to get it across to them that maybe it's time to leave, you guys.
right?
I do have a nice farm down here and facilities for them, and would build homes and everything else for them. But it's just too difficult. Just like with the everyday person there in the United States, it's almost impossible if you don't have a foreign language, and you've never been out of the country, and you're dependent completely on your income from your work there. How do you leave the country? How do you leave the United States and start a new life in somewhere where you don't even speak the language? You don't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's unfortunate that that's happening. They're going to see riots in the street. They're going to see looters. They're going to see problems. Not there. You all are. I don't see that happening much down here. We're pretty independent
Mm-hmm.
financially down here.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, I see it happening here. There's no doubt about it.